Hello. So the one of the two tools that I chose to evaluate with the UDL guidelines is my website. My website is generally used more just to convey information, not so to complete activities. So this was a little interesting for me to evaluate and really made me rethink some things. My process for evaluating, I actually printed out the chart right here, the UDL guidelines, and then I took notes in each little component here. So I'm going to be going through each section in each column and discussing the different things that my website does and does not do. So first off, under engagement, I want to talk about the recruiting interest. For both of my classes that I teach, Algebra and Math 7, I have a tab called Need Extra Help. This tab, I have videos of each skill that I've taught for each unit, and they are organized by unit. They're organized by alphabetically. So if a student wanted to come here and have extra practice on writing verbal expressions, they would click on that. That would take them to the video, and here is where they could...
Do you have mathitis?
Sorry. They could add on the captions then as well. That is really the only student choice on my website that I have. There's not much else for recruiting interest that my website displays. Same goes for sustaining effort and persistence. All of the descriptions in this element I do in my face-to-face lessons. The varying demands and the resources, fostering collaboration and community. Again, I just use my website for information, but next year I plan on delving into a little more of the collaboration aspect and maybe having students create their own pages that they share with me that I will then add to mine. Something like that. I have a lot that I want to look at for next year. The self-regulation. Under both of my classes, I have a calendar tab that tells my students when everything is due. So you can see at the beginning of this month they had a test. The next day they had a keystone packet that was due. These 2 days they had the algebra keystones. This day their test corrections for that test they took at the beginning of the month was due. The last day for them to turn in missing work was last Friday. And the last day of school is coming up faster than we know it. This is kind of like a little pacing for them. Make sure that they know that they're completing things when they're supposed to be completing them. I do not have this on here right now, but whenever I have a test, under the class notes and handouts, I will post a practice test. Again, it's not on here right now because they haven't had a test since the beginning of May. And even my class notes, you can see this is not up to date right here. I like to have current notes at the top, all the old notes at the bottom. But after the keystones, we just did a couple fun activities. Didn't really teach them too many new things since it was the end of the year and they had already taken the exam. I also have, and again, haven't taught anything new in the last week, but I will also put survey links on here. I have said in a few discussion posts before, if anyone hasn't seen, at the end of each lesson, I give my students a Google form to fill out. They have to type their name, their school email, just so I can make sure that, you know, Jacob isn't filling out the survey for Bobby, that it really is Jacob. He's using his school email. And then they select which class they're in, since I do teach 4 classes for 2 different sections of math. And then they rate their understanding of the lesson on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 being I had no idea what was going on, and 4 being I'm a master of this, I could teach it to someone else, and then they explain. So I will give the link to the students in class, but because they sometimes don't write them down, I will also post them on my website for a week. And I do give them 1 point for each survey. So that's really the only self-assessment that occurs there. I don't have any coping skills or anything like that on my website. The only thing that I could sort of think of if my students were anxious about the keystones or the PSSAs, under one of my tabs that I don't have displayed right now because it's kind of pointless to have up there, I had test taking strategies. So while this isn't a coping skill, it would maybe, reading it would maybe make my students feel a little more relaxed and thinking, okay, this is what I should do when I'm taking this test. But other than that, I mean, this is really a stretch saying this is a coping skill, in all honesty. And I don't have any self-assessment for behavior. The only self-assessment is for understanding of the lessons. And that is everything in the engagement section. Next, I'm going to move on to representation. Providing options for perception. As you can see on my different pages, I have different size color and different size fonts, and this is something that Google Sites, which is what I use to make my website, it does automatically. So if I want to, if I choose a different background, it's going to change the color automatically. If I choose a different size font, it's going to change the color again automatically. The next part of perception, the offering alternatives for auditory information. The only auditory information on my website is if students did need that extra help and they watched a video that would take them to YouTube and then they could click on the captions from there. There's no audio otherwise. And I do not have any alternatives for visual information. And this is something that I didn't think of until I was reviewing the UDL guidelines. Back when the keystones were approaching, I had inserted a countdown timer onto my website of when the keystones were going to occur, but I had no alternative text. It was just the timer. So had I had a student with a visual impairment, they maybe would have been confused as to what it was, or if they couldn't read it on my website, you know, it would have been nice if I had typed in, this is a timer, counting down to when the keystones are. They're on May 16th and 17th, but I did not think to put that in there. The next part of representation is language and symbols. Again, this is kind of a stretch, but the videos that I have that review each skill, that's kind of the clarifying right there. If a student was confused about the difference between the reflexive property and the symmetric property, they could watch those videos there. Clarifying syntax and structure, supporting decoding of text and mathematical notation and symbols. Those two things I do in class when I teach. I do not have anything of that nature on my website. As for promoting understanding across languages, I did not have any ESL students in any of my classes this year, so I do not have anything in any other languages. However, that could change in the future, so I'm going to be looking more into that. I don't know if there's a feature where I could, you know, embed something that would make it easier to translate a whole sheet. I know on Google Chrome, I think sometimes you can translate a whole page. I'm not sure exactly how. Maybe I'm thinking of a different application. At the last part of language and symbols, the illustrate through multiple media. Again, really just these videos here. I know it's only one type, but I did teach them how to do it in class, so that was one way. We take notes on it, that's another way, and then the third part would be the video of the skill. The last part of representation would be comprehension. I don't really do any of this on my website because it's all done when I'm teaching my face-to-face classes. The only thing I could think of possibly would be that last point that it makes is maximizing transfer and generalization. I do have As mentioned before, I have the calendar with all the due dates and important events on there. I have my class notes online every day that we take notes. I take a picture of it, I put it on my website. They'll click here, it'll open up a folder to my Google Drive where I've put JPEGs of everything and also PDFs of any homework assignments and anything that we cut out and glued into our journal. So you can see this was from the very beginning of the year. We cut that out and glued it into the journal, so I put that in there. And again, just the videos to review the skills if they need extra help for anything. And that sums up the representation. As for the last part, action and expression, the physical action, there was nothing that I could think of on any tabs of my website for anything physical. The methods for responsive navigation, I do this in my face-to-face lessons. In the optimized access to tools and assistive technologies, I'm not sure how I would implement this property on my website, because I know on certain laptops there's a way where you can change, I can change the brightness on my screen, or I can change the size of my cursor, but I don't know how I would do that on my website when everyone will be accessing it with a different device. I feel like they would have to change those settings on their device. For expression and communication, I do this in my face-to-face lessons. The only thing I could think of would be under the build fluencies with graduated levels of support for practice and performance. I do offer tutoring sessions. Since the last day of school is this Friday, I do have this tab hidden. But every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday after school, I had tutoring sessions, and I embedded my Google form into here so that parents could sign their students up for these sessions. Again, the videos to review the skills under the Need Extra Help tabs for each of my classes that offered some support, but other than that, all the support would come in my face-to-face classes. And the last part of this, action and expression is executive functions. The guide appropriate goal setting. Again, I think the calendar, so they can see the due dates for everything. I did have, back when we had the Keystones, I gave them a ton of online assignments through Study Island, and I created, there's the timer that I was showing you, I was discussing earlier. As you can see, it says 0 right now because the event did end, the Keystones are over. Anyway, back on track. I gave my students a lot of online assignments, and I had a basic suggested due date list of when everything should be done, and I did change it as we went. There were some things that I decided, these most likely definitely are not going to be on the Keystone, so they don't have to do that assignment. I gave them so many, I just wanted them to be prepared, and then I ended up exempting them from half of them because honestly it was way too many. But that was done. I did this through Google Docs and then just put it on my website through Google Sites. The support and planning, strategy and development, same thing, the calendar and then those suggested due dates. Facilitate managing information and resources, just the pictures of my class notes that I have on there. And then enhance capacity for monitoring progress. Again, I have my online surveys. What I want to start doing, and maybe I'll do this next year now that I've had 1 year of teaching under my belt, I want to start posting examples of good student work. This is how your homework should look, this is how your math journal should look, this is how your notes should look. That way they know what they should be doing. And that is the first tool I used. And I think that I am talking so much that I'm going to have to start a second video for the second tool. So please stay tuned.